I think if we start maybe with Johan with Adlibris, you started off as an e-tailer selling books online, and now we have a physical space. My question, I guess, is why? Why now?
We need some kind of physical service point to deliver what we can't deliver online. So I think we thought more about sort of, mailboxes, etc. or something. That kind of very... I've never been inside one, but I've seen them from the outside, and they look very horrible. But I think the idea is to deliver a lot of services to people. So that was the starting point, more than a physical store as such. And then what we've been trying to do is to fill it with the kind of services that we can't deliver online, which would be, for example, taking a book straight away from here, meeting people or meeting us who work here and all of that kind of things. So for us, that was more the kind of starting point.
Let's talk to the architects. What was the thinking behind the design of the space?
It's been an interesting journey, so to say, because being online, as Adlibris has been until recently, it was kind of abstract in a way. Nobody had a clue how it would look like when it become physical. Mm-hmm. So we got to start to think about what does that mean and what can it be. And I think when we ended up in this idea of working with massive wood all through, it's basically made upon the whole interior made upon those tables and benches and the simple book shelving. It's like a contrast between the abstract and the very present. And the other starting point we had was that it should be a pop-up store, something that could be easily demounted and moved to another place. So it's all sort of flat package system. You can store them in easily and move them away if you want to.
And did you think of certain retail cues in terms of, well, how do you move, product, or was this more? I mean, a lot of your work I see is very residential and feeling very kind of homey, very cozy in a way, very Nordic, very Scandinavian. Was there some thinking of marrying that with how do you actually sell books? Because I think that's what Johan wants at the end of the day.
I think we're, in a way, our starting point is very far from retail, and our perspective on building things, whether it's a lamp or a furniture or a house, is rather the opposite, that it should stand there for 200 years, not move. So it's the opposite of retail, but
and also a pop-up too.
Yeah, well, that's the paradox, that we've been invited a few times to produce interiors and also commercial spaces, and I think 9 times out of 10 have been super quick commissions, pop-up, before it was called pop-up. And we designed, for instance, the headquarters for a snow crash 15 years ago in Sweden, and that the whole idea of that venture was to create space with units that could be flattened and taken to the next space. So I think, on the other hand, that we react very intuitively to retail space, and that things that we enjoy, like the way that you can have an overview, a little bit like when you search on internet, that you can very quickly access the totality and understand sort of the boundaries of the space you're in on a site. That's something you like in a shop as well. So it's a platform. I think we saw it very much as a platform for whatever Johan and his crew wanted to do with it.
Which bookstores do you guys think are great to shop in?
Yeah, we got a library at the hotel Ett Hem where I'm working, and I would say the paper cut at Mäster Samuelsgatan, it's appealing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course I do buy a lot of online at Adlibris, for example.
Why don't we explain what Ett Hem is for some people who don't know?
Yeah, it's a small hotel in Regeringsgatan at Östermalm. It's only 12 rooms, and It's been open now for 4 years, and we run it as a home, which is the way we work the whole hotel. In the rooms, it's all individual interior in every room, and the contact with the guest is more familiar. If the guest wants it to be close and familiar, we are that way. We don't have a menu. The guest who stays at a hotel can walk up to the chefs and discuss what to have for dinner. And it's also a closed hotel. We have a gate, and you're not you cannot enter without having a reservation in advance. It's a domestic home. It's an old family home that has been restored and renovated, and the interior designer is Ilse Crawford. And together with the owner, she has really built up the old home that was from the beginning. We have a library, and we don't do coffee table books. We do interesting books and books that are historical and also modern books, of course, so the guests can hang out and there are books, different books in all the rooms as well, and not only glossy magazines that had brought into the house. It's actually hand-picked books and magazines in the rooms.
I think what's interesting with your hotel and the designer, Ilse Crawford, even though she's based in London, there's a very Scandinavian feel to it. It feels very cozy in a way. And then also, in a way, it feels like a place you would go, and it's not for someone who lives the fast-paced life in a way that you would slow down a little bit.
What Ilse did when she does new projects, she takes a lot of time to do research in the area, wherever it is in the world, and she done a lot of research of Sweden and Stockholm, and then she has, concerning the Scandinavian, she's appealed to the Scandinavian, also brought in designers from the whole world, and also the mix of new things and vintage things. And it's a lot about the quality, the sustainability, and what it ends. It's just going to last and get even more patina and looks even better and feels better. It's a lot about the feeling. It's not just putting the things, the furniture on a pedestal, and it's just it's meant to be used in the house by the guests. So everything is convenient to use and to live in. So we use the house as a home.
So would you say that's very Scandinavian in a way of living?
I would say lately in Scandinavia, the Scandinavian art, I would say, or the furniture, like what we have fabulous interior in Scandinavia, and also, but I would say she has added a lot coziness to it. It's not that clean, and a lot of textiles, and it's not just a sterile modern thing.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Scandinavian, Fredrik, your brand Austere has a very Scandinavian focus, Nordic focus. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, obviously, when we started, the whole point was to bring Scandinavian design over to the U.S. and educate the American consumer and give both established brands and young brands the opportunity to kind of grow in the U.S. So we take the Scandinavian a little bit loosely. We obviously do a lot of Finnish things, which is technically not part of Scandinavia. We also sell Ilse Crawford things, and she's obviously, as you pointed out, British. So for us, it's more about the aesthetic and the kind of dedication to detail and kind of the honesty of the furniture that we care about more than the geospecificity of it. But so yeah, that's kind of how we got started.
Would you say, when in terms of retail, that Scandinavia is having a moment in retail?
Yeah, I think a good idea can spread into many different things, and I think there was a lot of great ideas in design that came out of this. I think there's a disproportionate amount of great ideas coming out of this region, in tech, in design, in music, in furniture, certainly. And what I'm interested in is the kind of we talk about Austere, the store, as a magazine you can walk into, where all the aspects of it sort of come to life. And I think if you go back to some of the really classic buildings, there's one here, the city library, there's
Asplin's.
Yeah, exactly. Asplin's sort of masterpiece. You have the actual building, but he also made 30 different chairs, one for each room, and the little figurine and the water fountain is reflected in the fountain outside, and it's kind of the lifestyle approach, which has been a legacy, I think, of a lot of Scandinavian design, which I like. So the idea of walking into a store and just having a bunch of lights or a bunch of chairs or a bunch of things, I think is boring. I think the kind of one-purpose mono retail is kind of boring. So we wanted to. When you walk into us, there might be technology or furniture or food products or a lecture or a dinner even, and that to me that's how I like to shop. So, which is why I'm a huge fan of Ett Hem, which is this sort of encompassing. It feels like you walk into someone's really singular vision of what the ultimate destination should be, and you go there and you just like, fuck, I don't want to move ever, I don't want to leave, and that's what we're trying to do too.
Yeah, at Ett Hem, it's a lot about the experience of checking in at Ett Hem, a home, and it's really important for us to make the guest who stays with us to have the feeling of from he makes the booking until he leaves, it has to be filled up with a Ett Hem feeling. It's really so relaxing to check in at Ett Hem, because as soon as you enter the door, you just get relieved, and you don't want to leave. You will come back. You want to come back.
But I think that's when we start working with this, there's so few examples of good retail. I think. I mean, compared to restaurants and hotels, especially in Scandinavia and other places, there is a lot of sort of innovative, good concepts or spaces. I don't know. Looking at retail, very difficult to find that inspiration. We have much more to learn from hotels or from restaurants that start with retail. Like they come from I guess at Tham you could start a retail operation if you felt like it. But restaurants moving into takeaway and then selling things, that's much more inspirational, and those spaces are much better. Maybe because it's a different business model and it's kind of a different idea on actually hanging around is important. Most retail is the opposite. Looks like hell. All these evil methods of trying to sell stuff that people don't want, that are really effective. So I think from that point of view, it's sort of the comparison with Ett Hem or similar concept to trying to find inspiration in more kind of mass retail. It's very very difficult to find that.
Yeah, food seems to be a central part of the experience. So, for example, I'm seeing in the U.S. A chain like Urban Outfitters, which is like a clothing chain, is now buying food companies to have cafes in them. You obviously have a cafe here. Where does food fit into the idea of selling books?
If you have food, you need to work with that. It should be a space where you want to hang around. And of course, as a bookseller, it's also interesting with the reference to libraries. Sort of a good library also being a place where it's sort of commerce is not the key thing. It's actually reading and hanging around. There are good and bad libraries. We all know that. But I think sort of how do we make a space? So, since our business model kind of supports that if people don't buy books when they're here, they hopefully buy them from us anyway online.
Right.
So of course our business model supports it, but it's really kind of key on how to create something where people just want to stay.
Most bookstores tend to be just bookstores, and you think of Amazon in the U.S. as not just selling books, but selling everything. Is your idea to sell everything, or where do you move beyond books and then other things?
For us, and we need to be a little bit. We need to be very passionate about what we sell. If we're not passionate about it, it's not going to be a good customer experience. Mm-hmm. So being sort of this huge department store, and I think as Fredrik said as well, that sort of all kind of retail online or in physical stores that kind of just collects a lot of stuff from other brands, and then they try to sort of package it in a bad way and then sell it, is probably dead. Yeah. That model is very, very difficult. We're lucky in books because they write it. It takes them so long to write a book, so they can hardly build a kind of a retail operation themselves. So in the book industry, it's kind of not going to happen. I think sort of the classical retail is sort of has a future, but you know, a lot of those sort of retail concepts are really, you know, horrible.
Mm-hmm. We saw a couple years ago, you know, everyone was worrying about how bookstores were closing, that online retail for books was taking over, that then it was e-books that were replacing printed books, and now all of a sudden we're seeing the reverse. As a retailer, how do you look at?
No, but I think, and that's also to answer your first question. I think we need to sell we need to be more relevant and buy and sell other stuff than books, because I don't think kind of, especially in the physical space, but also online. You know, now it's a very sort of optimistic view again. You know, I doubt it. I think we're going to see, at least in Scandinavia, a second wave of closing of bookstores and retail in general. So although the kind of right now people are a little bit more optimistic, long term I'm very doubtful. A lot of small bookstores are, of course, you know, a great part of the city. However, also very small bookstores are really doing the same thing. They're expanding their, you know, either by events or by other products. They kind of expanding what they sell, but they're usually pretty good at kind of having some kind of a idea about what.
And Fredrik, you're in the way really promote the physical space of your showrooms in LA and in the East Hamptons.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, our model is retail is maybe 25 to 30% of our income. So our model is not entirely supported by the retail part. We definitely sell things, and we just actually relaunched our website, so it'll have much better e-commerce. But I think we're trying to create this ecosystem where the product, the educational part, the content, the kind of the story behind, you know, behind the product, who made it, that's what we do all of it. So in some ways we're a retail store, an agent, an advertising agency, a media company, which is not, you know, a little bit confusing to some people, I guess, but to us it makes perfect sense because it all kind of comes together. I mean, I think that, you know, we're sitting in a physical bookstore that's made by an online retailer. We have a hotel concept that if you put it next to a Marriott, they're like, they're almost not the same type of company. Like what you do and what a hotel chain does, it's like apples and pears. And you have architects who've been, you know, who've taken something very permanent and made it into something sort of not permanent. So to me, I think it's interesting. We see it in industry after industry that you know, cats are barking and dogs are meowing. It's changing, and I think that to me is really interesting.
What have you learned about designing spaces with retail components?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think that the point with architecture and buildings is that they can contain almost any function. So whether it's retail or not, it's space, and it should be probably good for many different uses. There are, however, a few challenges, because I think people are quite quick to sort of distinguish if you're trying to trick them into something that is just pushing them about. And so I think our general approach is to try and create as generous spaces as possible, open and not making a sort of super hard distinction between where you are supposed to spend time or have lunch or shop. Even though the program is retail or shopping, could also communicate and be part of the city. So that's a challenge as an architect, I think.
What are some retail brands today that you guys all think are doing a good job?
I think Aesop is doing an amazing job in how they take, you know, you look at their stores and you recognize that it's that brand. I think no one sort of, you see that what it is, but they look entirely different, and they kind of adapt their retail design concept based on where they are. I think they
Well,
do. a
yeah,
really
and
good
they
job.
work with local architects.
Local architects.
young
They also have like the
emerging
one
architects.
that's very close to where we are, which is the fashion district of downtown LA. They've used this material, which is these sort of large rolls that they sort of put fabric on, and that was the material they used, which I'm sure is really inexpensive. And other stores have used other types of material, but it has a reference back to the neighborhood where the store is, which I think is genius. And I think a lot of sort of corporate clients would be like, you know, it should all be the same, and will people know it's an Aesop if it looks different? And some bean counter somewhere will be like, well, we'll save, you know, this many dollars if we make everything exactly the same. And that's, I think, a lot of retailers are suffering because it's boring. Like,
Johan?
I think the kind of on the opposite kind of scale of would be the IKEA pop-up things they're going to launch, or the nearby. I haven't seen them. I'm not sure if they have launched any yet.
The laboratories?
Yeah, the one
Yeah.
that's going to be close to the inner city and going to be a combination of retail sales and click and collect.
Yeah.
Could be interesting.
And why?
Because they kind of solve the problem on what e-commerce should be for IKEA. Because of course their business model has taken all the advantages of an e-commerce model and already, you know, way back, and sort of let the customer do all the things, and therefore they have so low prices. So e-commerce becomes a huge problem for them. How can we, you know, we're going to add services here, so, you know, it doesn't work. So now they sort of find this model of sort of, okay, we can be closer to the city. It's a click and collect point. However, we can also sell stuff there. So kind of they tweaked e-commerce into something that fits them. And then it's going to be interesting to see how they make the space, because of course that's not their strong history.
For me, working a lot with food and beverage, I would say the Dalesford in London has a couple of shops that are really inspiring. And
why would that? Can you describe what it is and why you think it's interesting?
I think it's the mix of the people working there with their knowledge, and they're closed up to all the products that they sell, and also a really nice interior, and it really makes you want to buy a lot. And it's kind of have a big farm as well in the Cotswold, where they have a big nice store. It's kind of get the country feeling, the cozy feeling in London.
I'm not sure if I have those good references,
Yeah.
but as an architect, it's kind of interesting to look upon retailing, because it's a part of how a city develops. Urbanness is quite often described as a dense, where the retailing is very dense. So, and I was thinking about those huge malls that are coming up around the suburbs of Stockholm, like the Mall of Scandinavia, for instance, where they sort of totally blurred the border between the private and the public. You feel like you're in a public place, but even though it closes at 8 perhaps, and it's all private, of course. And the consequences of that is kind of interesting to think about. Perhaps the retail, in a smaller scale, if you scale it down to a place like this, we talked about the different functions within the shop. It's not only this traditional topology of a bookstore, it holds also a cafe, and you can sit down, you can use it as a mediathek, more or less. And this sort of blurred lines of what retail can be is perhaps a consequence of allowing the border between the private and public being dissolved. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Traditionally, you want to have really clear lines between the public and the private, but perhaps we can see possibilities within this new approach as well. And I think when it comes to those smaller retails that you appreciate, because retailing is about attracting people, right? I think it has to have some sort of personality and character instead of just being this super international brand. Like the total contrast of those malls and the retailers you can find there. They all look the same wherever you go. So I think the personality and the sort of different offers retail can give is properly attractive.
So if someone was going to start their own retail brand or their own hotel, what would be the advice that you would give that person?
try to keep it small and work with great quality instead of think just too big.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it would be to do something different, because I think generally both shops and hotels and restaurants all tend to go in the same direction, and right now everybody's really, really professional, which means that the sort of amount of places where you can find more or less the same thing on a very high level is abundant, and therefore I think I'm really curious. I'm looking forward to see someone getting out of the box somehow and offer something else.
The dumbest way of differentiating yourself is price, right? Because then you race to the bottom and then kind of goes up. You know, brand and products. It's so easy today to copy a product that I think the brands that we all love are the ones that create an experience that is just so special and unique. And it doesn't have to be fancy and snobby always, but that's kind of where you really can find sustainable growth. You know, we did a collaboration with COS, which is on the cover of your magazine this issue, which I think is a really interesting. So it's a sub brand of H&M. I think somebody told me it's a $7 billion revenue company now, which is pretty impressive. I think that their price point is really good, and the quality of the clothes and the sort of silhouette is really quite amazing. And I think that for them to come into our space, you know, we worked with an architect firm in Brooklyn called Snarchitecture, and what they did was, to me, really interesting branding, because you walk into the space and immediately you understand what they stand for. You get that they're into architecture and design. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can buy the clothes. I think that is really modern branding, and they do a really good job.
So it's I think it's time.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.